The Arkansas Razorbacks sign a new NIL deal dealing with JB Hunt. We're going to talk about that, as well as some big news when it comes to a new coaching hire for the Razorback football team. And we're going to be joined by Brandon Marcello of 247 Sports. It's all coming up on the Locked On Razorbacks podcast.
You are Locked On Razorbacks, your daily podcast on the Arkansas Razorbacks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. I am your host, John Nabors. I am also the host of Out of Bounds. You can catch every weekday afternoon from 1 to 4 on 1037 The Buzz and 1037thebuzz.com. Hope everybody's having a wonderful Wednesday as we're going to talk a lot of college football. And welcome in Brandon Marcello of 247 Sports, covering all things college football. Brandon, really appreciate you joining me this afternoon, man. How you doing?
I'm doing great, John. How are you, man?
Well, I'm doing good. And I, saw that this is actually news that just came out literally before we started the podcast. I saw you tweeted a little bit about it as well. And I'm sure we're going to get into the NIL and everything. But seeing this news where you got the AAC, not the conference, but a new nonprofit organization put together and backed by some individuals involving with the JB Hunt Company and all that, which anytime you see NIL deals and everything get put up, and it's always a big deal. But when you see something like that, see JB Hunt connected with it and at the University of Arkansas, it seems like that could be something that could really benefit some of the NIL deals that Arkansas is making, not only with football, but with all student athletes at the U of A.
You mean to tell me that JB Hunt family didn't start an NIL company for the University of Alabama?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is becoming commonplace at universities across, well, really just football crazy universities. You're seeing it at Texas. You're seeing it at BYU. You're seeing it at Florida and Georgia in some similar capacities. This is it's not too surprising. I think as long as there's not some type of like national legislation that ends up kind of outlawing what I call these NIL super PACs, you're going to see these pop up probably pretty much at every big time school in the country. It's an easy way to, listen, it is what it is. It's you're paying the players to come to to the university that you favor, and they're also going to be part of your NIL companies selling products or doing whatever. So it's it's above board, but really it is what it is. You're enticing players to come to that school, and more power to them. As long as there's money out there to be made, let it be made. And why not college athletes who I mean, goodness gracious, they've been breaking their backs for years, and now they're finally getting to get paid.
Well, you bring up the fact of maybe having some sort of new policies or rules put into place, some legislation put into place to try to make this either better or worse, depending on how you look at it. But just in your opinion, obviously, with something like Arkansas and a school like Arkansas, they could really benefit from the NIL. But it also seems like in other places, there are a lot of different ways that this could go wrong, could go awry, could be problematic for a lot of schools. Is there anything in particular that you think should be legislated when it comes to the NIL? Anything specific?
Well, I think that the one thing that you would hear, the most common concern, and something even some of these schools would probably agree with, is, the idea was that schools wouldn't facilitate NIL deals. And now, but as long as you don't have a state law in place, you can do that. You can facilitate NIL deals with a company if you're a school. But I do think that if you were to put truth serum in a lot of these schools, they'd be like, yeah, we probably don't want to facilitate these deals because we're getting into some legal trouble probably at some point, some way, whether it's because an NIL deal falls through with that company and then somehow we're brought into the legal situation, or just for the matter of fact that it's going to become about the free market, but also equal opportunities to gain money. And And then also becomes a whole competition thing among schools. So I think they would like to not be directly involved with the facilitation of that. But as it stands now, most schools can do that. And that's why you're seeing, like, for example, in the state of Ohio, them kind of rescinding their own state legislation because there's no national federal mandate or law in place. And the Ohio law was kind of limiting them from being able to do certain things, and that's why Ohio and even Alabama, they're doing away with their state laws because they're like, well, everybody else, it was advantageous for you not to have a state law allowing NIL because if you didn't have a state law, it was just do whatever you want, and schools can be involved. And so they're getting rid of these laws now in some of these states. But I do think that things will tighten up a little bit. Things will change the next couple of years whenever federal legislation is passed. That'll happen at some point. It's going to be a slow-moving ball, and you're going to hear a lot of gnashing of teeth on both sides. And, of course, it'll get political among parties and all that. But at some point, they're going to tighten the regulations on this stuff. And I would think one of the first things they end up doing is trying to remove or provide more guidance as far as how schools can be involved. Because as of right now, if you don't have a state law not against it, schools could facilitate some of these deals, and we're seeing that now.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that there's a lot of schools too where it's pretty obvious. Like the first one that pops in my head, I think everyone got brought up was like Texas A&M. They signed the number one recruiting class like ever, as far as rankings go, and everyone knows and can kind of look at the fact that Texas A&M has a huge fan base with a lot of money back behind it, and they're a type of school that can really benefit from it. And I think people, at least here in the state of Arkansas, and Razorback fans, were kind of hoping that, hey, people don't realize just how much money is in the state of Arkansas, especially in Northwest Arkansas. There's a lot of companies, Walmart, Tyson, ever heard of them? They're pretty big deals. I think everyone's kind of holding out hope and was wanting that to happen for Arkansas too. And that's why I feel like schools like Arkansas or like Texas A&M and all those things, like where they normally wouldn't be able to pull down top recruiting classes, number one recruiting classes or whatnot. Arkansas has yet to do it just yet, but it feels like the NIL could really put them in that position to where they could finally sign those big time classes because they have a sneaky amount of money that could be potentially used up in Northwest Arkansas.
Yeah, the thing is that if you're Arkansas, you want to try and get on the forefront of all this because everybody else is going to join the party and they're going to start throwing around comparable money. But if you're Arkansas and you can convince some of these bigger companies to jump in early, but also put in maybe a little bit more money than these other companies will be willing to spend, or these other individuals will be willing to spend with NIL, that could be advantageous for you. But I think the window here is shrinking for a lot of schools to be able to take advantage of this because other schools are going to do it, and it's almost going to become like the playing field's almost going to be evened out quite a bit among like a group of probably like 30 schools. And so the top tier schools that are getting recruiting classes in the end, here in a year or two, they're going to end up still being those top 10. But if you want to potentially get in the top 5 or top 10 or something like that, get one of your greatest recruiting classes you've ever had, you better jump in quickly and do it now and get it done for the transfer portal that's going on now and for this 2023 signing class next February. Because after that, I think things are going to even out and the big dogs will be the big dogs and everything. And even now, you look at the recruiting rankings, it's not much different from the past other than Texas A&M is out on top and might end up having the best recruiting class in internet history. But to be quite honest, I mean, the Aggies have been building toward this class for several years. They've had top 7, top 5, then top 3 classes each of the last 4 years, and they've been building toward this. And, of course, money has something to do with it, but also the indirect money with the facilities. I mean, the incredible upgrades they've done facility-wise just in these last 5 years there. I mean, goodness gracious, they tore down half the stadium and resurrected it and put it up in a year. I mean, that is serious money to be moving that much dirt and building that much, half a stadium practically in a calendar year. So you got to be advantageous. Now's the time. If you sit around and wait even till this summer, I think it'll be too late for a lot of these schools.
Do you think we'll ever get to a point in time where it'll be public knowledge as far as how much certain student athletes or schools are giving or whatever it may be? Because I think that that's something that maybe having like you're lacking a transparency for a lot of fans. And we're not saying that they deserve it, but it's just like people may not understand just how much money is involved. Like people see the A&M, because I know we're using them as an example. It's like they add a huge class and it's all with NIL. Okay, well, how much are they spending? Like, is there going to be, do you think there'll ever be a time when we'll be able to know numbers specifically to schools, to athletes, be public knowledge when it comes to the NIL and how much these players are making?
I think one way to maybe get to that point is if, for some reason, federal legislation allows the schools to continue to facilitate deals, and then the school has to report like how much they were directly involved with as far as money, exchanging hands, so they have an idea of how big these deals are that the schools are directly involved with. But, listen, there was talk, goodness, this doesn't seem too long ago, but I guess it was about a year ago. The NCAA was talking about building a database where the schools and the players would have to report to the schools, this is how much my NIL deals is or are. And then they put it in a database, and it's available to every administrator or coach or whatever in college football or college sports, and then go through there and look, go, wow, this kid got a $3 million deal or whatever, how that happened and who's the company that's paying him. But that hasn't happened. Some coaches want to see that just so they can compare and contrast. But this is way above my head legally, but these are private deals among, individuals. This isn't like, something that is being actually paid and funneled through the school officially, so they can't do it. But I mean, I, for one, would like to see it just from a business perspective for who I work for, 247 Sports, because we were trying to, maybe I'm going too inside baseball. We were trying to think about building our own database and rankings of one, here's the highest paid players, but also here's the most money going to players at this school. And then we would try to figure out, like we do with a lot with our recruiting rankings, some type of formula for NIL rankings where it's not just the money, but it's also the potential earnings, the amount of NIL companies in that area, and the amount of players and all that. We figure out some type of formula to rank them and do it that way. I think that's that's going to be a huge business at some point for some media outlet, or maybe all in the future, is trying to get their hands around NIL, how much players are making, or at least getting a very good sense of that. And I think that is coming, because you see it with some of these, these companies like Open Doors or Influencer. They've got their own databases kind of built based off of what they're hearing, even with, players they're working with and companies they're working with. And so you're even seeing with Ohio State, I think this week, they released saying, hey, we're the number one school in the country when it comes to NIL deals. We pay, not we, but Ohio State athletes were end up getting paid like a total of like $3-something million. Now, that sounds like a lot, but really it probably isn't. And I part of me, the cynical part of me, thinks that that's not number one in the country. Some school out there has a load of athletes making more than that as a total, but it's very difficult to prove nowadays, because you're just leaning on information that can be gathered by, Open Doors and Influencer, and, good on them for doing that. But I want to see something that's a little bit more comprehensive, because listen, we're all competitors. We all like seeing rankings. I want to see rankings. I want to see who's the fifth highest NIL deal in the country right now. I want to compare and contrast.
We'll be joining or continuing our discussion with Brandon Marcello of 247 Sports here in just a second. But first, folks, I got to tell you about Built Bar. Obviously, with the new year, we're going through our New Year's resolutions. We're trying to lose some weight, trying to eat a little bit healthier, but it's tough. It's tough to be able to cook a lot of those healthy meals, to be able to find the ingredients that you have. And that can be difficult, even find time for exercise. But luckily for you, Built Bar is a very convenient thing that can be easily used as a snack on the go, and it tastes amazing. Not only is it healthy with only 130 calories, but 17 grams of protein, but they come in different flavors. And it tastes amazing because it's covered in 100% chocolate. Almost seems too good to be true, but it's not. It's legitimate. And here, by listening to this podcast, If you just go to their website at built.com, enter in the promo code LOCKED15, you'll get 15% off your next order. It's as simple as that. Again, go to built.com, use the promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com.
You are Locked On Razorbacks, your daily podcast on the Arkansas Razorbacks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, we're still joined by Brandon Marcello of 247Sports. And Brandon, since this is the Locked On Razorbacks podcast, obviously we have to discuss the Razorbacks. And it's been fun being able to, like, where football season comes to an end, we know basketball season's going on right now. Baseball season will be around the corner. But just over the past few weeks, there's been so much to talk about with the Razorbacks. Some of it has been, of course, negative at times, but a lot of positive, a lot of players coming in through the transfer portal, a solid recruiting class. They got a new coaching hire, which I know we'll talk about here in just a second. But just from your perspective as a national college football writer, what have you made of the Razorbacks and Sam Pittman and the job he's done, not only in the football season, but also in this offseason period and taking advantage of the transfer portal?
Yeah, to me, there are two schools in the country who have done like the perfect job of handling the transfer portal in the offseason the last 2 years. And that's Michigan State and Arkansas. Michigan State, I mean, the way they've complemented their classes in Mel Tucker's first 2 years is just phenomenal. And if I was in a rival coach, I'd be trying to figure out, like, what exactly are they doing to best put themselves in position to land these players. I mean, goodness gracious, the receivers they've got, the quarterback they've got, and then, of course, the running back they had, Kenneth Walker III, who was a former Wake Forest running back they brought on campus last year. And then they're doing it again right now with some great pickups. And Arkansas has obviously done that. I mean, look at what they've been able to do at receiver, along with what they're doing now in their defensive backfield and on defense, and really being able to kind of supplement everything. I know a lot of fans in Arkansas and following on Twitter is like they're freaking out because all those defensive players are entering the portal, and it's like, yeah, that sucks, but they're going to get some guys out of the portal. I mean, every team's going to, and they got some good pickups there. You know, I think that they've done a really good job in the portal really these last 2 to 3 years to supplement everything. The recruiting, the high school recruiting is going very well. I think, to me, we're seeing a new thing happen here, and it's obvious that we're all kind of obsessing over the portal right now, and because it's free agency, it's immediate, and we already know what that player is capable of achieving when they get on campus because we've already seen them play for the most part at other schools. And then we're losing track really of what's going on with high school recruiting and how a class is looking and what those players might look like in two years or so. And coaches can't lose track of that. And I know some coaches are losing track of that from talking to them a couple of weeks ago at the coaches convention in San Antonio. They're so obsessed with the transfer portal because it's almost like for reporters like me, I got my phone here. I was looking at it during the break. With Twitter, I'm always looking at it to make sure I'm not getting scooped on something or there's breaking news or something's going on. And the coaches are like that with the transfer portal. They have to go refresh the freaking page, every 10 minutes to see if there's a kid in there they didn't quite know about, so they could be the first person to call that kid rather than one of their rivals or another school that they might be seriously considering in the next week or so. So I think there's some ways to fix that, and we can get into that later. But when it comes to Arkansas, I think they've done a tremendous job of picking up players to fill those spots that they need filled. But they just got to keep it going with the high school recruiting, which they are. I think in a lot of ways, and I don't know if anybody's really saying this, and I am not, being negative in any way about Sam Pittman right now. But a lot of the players he's winning with were Chad Morris players. Not all of them, obviously not at quarterback and some of the receivers and everything, and some of the guys that are able to get in here. But a lot of them are Chad Morris guys, and that's what happened. I mean, listen, any staffs like that, you're in your second year, you're playing and coaching other players from a previous staff. But I really like what they're doing recruiting right now. I think that Pittman's. Yeah, I don't believe, unless there's another coach out there that I just don't know of, that would have done what he's done with his staff in the portal these last 2 years. Maybe other than Mel Tucker at Michigan State, like I mentioned. Arkansas is not winning 9 games, this past season without what they're doing in the portal, without the offensive coordinator Kendall Briles and what he's able to do with KJ Jefferson, those receivers. I think it's just kind of a perfect storm, and I'm kind of actually surprised that Briles didn't get more sniffs for being a head coach somewhere. I do think that there's still some hesitancy there from some schools because of his connections to his father, obviously, and at Baylor. But at some point, he's going to be a head coach. But to keep him and Coach Odom, Barry Odom, on staff again, Barry Odom could have left last year for LSU. They wanted him, and he turned him down. And then Kendall Briles, obviously, with Miami this past year, just in the last couple of weeks. That is those two, keeping them two on staff is as big as a win as any 5-star transfer they could get right now. That is gigantic. That's 2 5-star pickups in a lot of ways for Arkansas in the transfer portal, having those two stick around. And this might be weird to say, but Arkansas's defense might actually be better next year. I think it might be, and I think the offense will be comparable to what it was this past season. Maybe a little bit below, just because, goodness gracious, Traylon Burks is an All-American type receiver. But we'll see what they do in the transfer portal. That's the other thing. The transfer portal is winding down right now because classes are underway, and you're getting near that point where you can only drop classes or join a class until a certain date. In fact, USC, I think, is coming up Friday, so keep an eye on that with Caleb Williams. But it'll pick up again once we get near the end of spring practice, as everybody knows, and who knows who will be in the portal at that point. It's very exciting for fans to watch it and for reporters, but man, for these coaches, they're pulling their hair out and it's freaking them out, and they want to see some type of regulation around it.
Well, Brandon, and you mentioned Kendall Briles and Barry Odom, which I think Razorback fans may sometimes take that for granted, because there's some Razorback fans, not all of them, but there's some out there that they said, we can let Briles go and everything. And I'm like, man, it's like, that is a bad idea. You don't realize how good he is. Arkansas was averaging over 5 touchdowns a game last year offensively, and with KJ and all that. And I think that's something that just really speaks to what Pittman's able to do, because before, like, you see what happened with Ole Miss, for instance. They had a great year. Go to the Sugar Bowl. Matt Corral was great. Lane Kiffin doing a lot of good things in year 2. And then their OC leaves for Oklahoma. Their DC leaves for Texas A&M. Their special teams coordinator leaves for out. Like, they just get gutted because everyone's like, hey, they're doing really good. Let's go and get those coaches. And then so people like at Arkansas were kind of expecting that too at some point, be like, as soon as we have success, people are going to come in and start poaching our coaches. And, maybe not as many offers were there, but with Razorback fans, they see, wow, we had a great year. We had a great offense. Our defense was pretty solid too. And our coaches all stayed the same, where you see other programs that have success and they get poached a lot. It just kind of shows maybe these coaches really love what's going on in Arkansas and really love coaching with Sam Pittman.
Yeah, and I think also that these coaches, Kendall Briles and Barry Odom particularly, they're waiting to be head coaches more so than just go be a coordinator somewhere else. They're having success now, so why just parlay that success into a lateral move or maybe a semi-lateral move, like to a quote-unquote bigger school? But you're not going to get much different pay, and you're chancing the fate there that you might not be as successful that year, and then all of a sudden you have to coach another 2 years to maybe be in the hunt for a head coaching job. So it's smart on them to stay here at Arkansas, because they're having success. They've got good enough players to win 8-9 games a year, as we've seen, and why not be part of that and be able to run your system unimpeded? A lot of these schools they would go to, they're not going to be running a system all by themselves, and They get that at Arkansas. And then back with Kendall Briles, I mean, you hit it on the head. I mean, Kendall Briles leaves Arkansas. Who do you get that's comparable? You don't. And here's why. And I'm sure this has probably been written about at Arkansas, but Kendall Briles, that Briles offensive system is one of the more secretive systems in college football. That circle is super tight. They don't really allow people to really see the offense when they invite coaches in or when they go to coaches clinics. It's a very tight circle, and they do not let people in on the secrets. They do things differently, especially with how they handle receivers. And maybe I shouldn't be saying that because I might end up without a finger here in a minute. No, I'm kidding. But but it's very secretive, kind of what they do there. And I mean, listen, it's football, and I've been told this by several coaches. Like, football is a pretty simple sport. We just try to act like it's really, really complicated, and we try to mask things and make it seem like everything should be super secretive, but it's not really. But with that system, it is a little bit different, and they've chosen to kind of keep everybody out of it, and it's a very tight circle. So, having said that, you lose Kendall Briles. Who do you hire to run a similar system at Arkansas with the personnel that they recruited that was specifically recruited for that system? There isn't anybody really. You can go get someone that runs an up-tempo system where they're doing air raid stuff, but it's not going to be the exact same thing. And listen, be quite honest, if they lost Kendall Briles today, I guarantee you that offense next season will dip if that happens. I don't care who they get. They can go get who's the hottest name that anybody would want. I don't care. I think it would dip. It would dip. I mean, Zach Kitley. Probably nobody's like, who the heck's that? That guy is going to be a superstar. He's the offensive coordinator at Texas Tech right now. He was the offensive coordinator at Western Kentucky this past year. He took one of the worst offenses, one of the bottom 7 offenses in the country, to make it the number 2 scoring offense in the country in his first year. And it's an air raid system. They throw it a lot. And their quarterback broke NCAA records this past season. And now he's at Texas Tech. And Kendall Briles, there's certain offensive coordinators out there that are just a step above everybody else and is doing something that no one else is really doing or quite understands. And those two guys right there, those are the two best offensive coordinators in the country. And if you're a Razorback fan and you don't quite understand that, boy, are you going to be feeling bad whenever Kendall Briles ends up leaving Arkansas, because that is going to not necessarily be a dark day, but that's going to be something that's going to be maybe one of Sam Pittman's toughest jobs, is trying to replace Kendall Briles and doing so with the personnel they've got and with a system that's so unique.
We're going to finish up our conversation with Brandon Marcello here in just a second of 247 Sports, but BetOnline would like to wish you a happy new betting year as we continue to march to the playoffs and beyond. BetOnline remains the #1 spot for all the best sports wagering action for 2022. New year and a new updated desktop and mobile website to sign up today and receive 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use the promo code LOCKEDON to get started. From football, basketball, hockey, boxing, UFC, right down to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers for 2022. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all of your favorite sports. So head over down to betonline.ag where the game starts.
You are Locked On Razorbacks, your daily podcast on the Arkansas Razorbacks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Brandon Marcello of 247 Sports is our guest here on the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. Now, Brandon, we've been talking some Arkansas football and everything, and I want your opinion on this because after the season ended, everyone's putting out their way too early top 25 rankings and all that stuff, and it's fun, and because there's a lot of things we don't know about. But I start seeing some college football, legitimate college football experts, writers, whoever, who put out their top 25, and I see somebody have Arkansas at 15. I think Brett McMurphy was there. I was like, wow, that's pretty high. That's pretty good. And then I see Joel Klatt have Arkansas at number 7 in the country and top 10. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, hold on a second. What did I miss? What are we talking about here? Like, I see all that stuff. And again, if you're a Razorback fan, you love it because you're finally getting some respect and it's cool to see. But I mean, in your opinion, as of right now, just what we know, I mean, what is the ceiling for Arkansas next year? Because I feel like even the best case scenario for the Razorbacks would be the number 15 team in the country, but maybe I'm seeing something that other people aren't.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And I talk to a lot of people that are very close and involved in personnel decisions at Arkansas, and they're a little bit worried about some holes they've got right now and replacing and replicating the production. Plus, that schedule is what it is next season. So, yeah, I was kind of taken aback. You mentioned the ranking was number 7. I'm all like, no one I know is thinking anything near that. That is even, listen, they're close to it and they want it to be that. And it's like, no, there's no way that's going to happen. So, yeah, I think this is probably a ceiling year for them to be like top 15 because of the schedule and also some of the holes that need to be filled. But again, as I mentioned, I do think the defense has a chance to be better, even with all those pieces leaving and with these new pieces coming in to fit everything. The pickups in the transfer portal have been phenomenal. I guess as of the recording of this, it's Arkansas and Ole Miss with the most 4 stars out of the transfer portal right now in the country. And listen, you never know how some of these transfer guys will fit in, whether they're busts or they're superstars. Like you see an average to above average player all of a sudden become a superstar in a new school because they fit better in a system or whatever. So we'll see. Listen, it's always difficult doing way too early preseason rankings, but it's impossible now. I mean, listen, I did one myself. It's ridiculous. I think I called it the way too early preseason poll because we don't even know what a roster is going to look like when spring practice starts now because of the transfer portal. So, having said that, they've got pieces to maybe be a top 15 team. But that schedule's brutal next season.
Yeah, it's a tough one. And just like it's the tradition like no other with the Razorbacks getting the number 1 toughest schedule in the country.
Yeah.
But a lot, and let's be honest about it, though, a lot of that has to do with the fact that Arkansas usually hasn't had to play Arkansas. That's usually, and you're in the SEC West, you don't get that easier win when it was usually the Razorbacks. But Sam Pittman, obviously going 9-4 this past year, navigated through that difficult schedule. And I know there's a lot of hype and excitement surrounding the Razorbacks heading into next year and a lot of the praise that's being heaped upon them. Razorback fans love, but they also know just previous history. Hey, there's always going to be that catch. There's always that something that could go wrong for them. We're
in the business of recency bias. We just go, wow, Arkansas was really hot near the end of the year and beat Penn State. And they got their quarterback coming back and, but you got to really research it. It's difficult. It's like I said, it's impossible to really look at, but to say with certainty and confidence, Arkansas is a top 10 preseason team right now. I mean, come on, it's not that high. They're top 25, they're top 20, but I don't know about them putting them in the top 10 at this point. And it's not a knock on Arkansas, or anything. It's just the way it is. I mean, that schedule's brutal, but just too many questions to just confidently say that. I mean, but here's the other thing. You can predict anything you want because no one knows.
Yeah, it's completely and totally unpredictable for sure. And last one, though, Brandon, because I, again, appreciate you coming on. I wanted to ask you about this, too, because it came out yesterday that Arkansas, of course, had hired a new defensive backs coach. I know you were on top of the report of Sam Carter leaving for Ole Miss. Arkansas had a pretty quick turnaround there. Still looking for a defensive line coach, but they were able to hire Dominic Bowman, who was the cornerbacks coach over at Marshall. And it seemed like that this was a pretty positive hire from all people kind of talking about who know the situation. What do you know about Dominic Bowman and the type of hire that Sam Pittman made with his cornerbacks coach?
I know a lot of people say fast rising star in the industry and everything, but this guy is that. And he's going to be going to some big things here in the next few years. Big pickup for them. And his connections to Memphis with recruiting and everything could be very beneficial. And just as a recruiter overall will be very beneficial for him. I'm very interested to see what he can do as a recruiter now at a Power 5 school. That'll be great for them. And then, you know, I'm very curious what's going on with Arkansas's defensive line coach search. I talked to someone, I don't know when this is coming out, talked to someone yesterday about it that's in the know, and they said that they're still going down the list and interviewing people. They're doing their due diligence. I know there was one guy I can't mention because I'll tip off, but one guy that was very interested in the job and apparently he's not really involved in it. And if that's the case, then Arkansas is probably hot on the trail of some really, really good defensive line coaches. I'll just say that, if that name is not being really bantied about a lot. So, I hate saying addition by subtraction when coaches leave and everything like that, but I mean, Bowman is about as good of a hire as you can make, and there's a reason why that hire was made so quickly. I'll just say that.
Yeah, I think everyone kind of saw the writing on the wall of the timeline of everything, and I guess it made a lot of sense. So, but it'll be interesting to hear from him once he finally gets on campus, and we'll see how that defensive line coach hire ends up being as well. Brandon Marcello of 247Sports. Brandon, really appreciate you joining us, man, and enjoy the transfer portal NIL season, which essentially is what it's become. So hopefully you don't go out of your mind trying to cover all this stuff.
I love it, and like I said, I'm really falling in love with the NIL stuff. I like seeing the kids get paid, even though they're getting paid more than me. But hey, they're talented. I'm not, and they deserve it. And I'm glad to see the kids get that opportunity. And I can't wait to see how this thing evolves over the next couple of years.
Absolutely, it's going to be awesome. Appreciate it, Brandon. Have a great one, man.
All right, thanks. It was fun.